Hi there, this is Bino again, the archivist at the Musée Héritage Museum with the Arts and Heritage Foundation St. Albert. I'm back this week to share with you a newspaper collection that we have in our archives. Now, newspapers are considered secondary sources, but they also have valuable information during concentrated points of time. So I'm happy to share with you a special newspaper collection in our archives called the St. Albert Star, or in French, the L'Etoile de St. Albert. The Star, or the L'Etoile newspaper, was published in St. Albert from 1912 to 1914. The Star was unique in a few different ways. It was one of the first bilingual newspapers in Alberta, and each edition of the paper had both an English and French section, respectively called the Star and the L'Etoile. This allowed the newspaper to serve both the Anglophone and the Francophone communities in St. Albert. This also led to some interesting differences between the two sections within the paper. One of the quirks of this newspaper was that the English and French sections would each have their own stories. Sometimes you had the same story told in both languages, but often they were altered or different stories entirely printed in each language. Take, for example, this story about George Gagnon in the December 31, 1912 edition of the Star. It's a full-page story of his life, but if you look at the same edition of the L'Etoile, the story is reduced to a small condolence paragraph. Take another example from the April 2, 1913 edition of the L'Etoile that speaks about the death of Arthur Lambert. This story is completely missing from the same edition of the Star. You'll notice, however, that the story of the electoral campaign of Hector Landry is in both languages with equal spacing. The period between 1912 and 1914 was an interesting time in St. Albert and the world in general, just before the start of the First World War. This newspaper captured all types of events, going from global events such as the Titanic going down and the aftermath, and local events such as the very first accident on the Perron Street Bridge that took the life of a man. What's also interesting are all the ads in the paper in both English and French. It's a great snapshot of all the different businesses in town, and also something like the timetable of the short-lived interurban railway between St. Albert and Edmonton. Ads can tell just as much as articles about how times were like in St. Albert. All newspapers can be really fascinating to look through just on pure aesthetic purposes, but also for gleaning information. And because of that, I invite you to check back on our blog on museeheritage.ca. I'll share a little bit more with you about the paper and about journalism in Alberta in the early 20th century. And finally, I'll share with you how you can search through digitized versions of paper online.